Some of you have items on your table, others of you do not. Please don't feel left out. There will be other things for you to do. They are part of the presentation as we kind of move forward. This morning's presentation is incredibly cognitively full. There's an enormous amount of information that we need to cover, and I think that we'll probably just barely scratch the surface. Autism is a passion of mine. I've been working with students on the autism spectrum since 1997, when I first met a little boy who was absolutely fascinated. One was fascinated by the weather, and I realized that I couldn't do any occupational therapy if the Weather Channel was on. And then the other young man was fascinated by washing machines, and I actually used that as his reinforcement to get him to work. Those were my first two students. And they were fascinating and kind of sent me on an interesting journey of working with little kids who had very little language, and would say things like "run, Scar, run away, and don't ever return," which is a quote from the Lion King, and that's how he communicated with everybody, through video quotes. And another young man who I saw in tears, and I said, "Are you all right?" And he said, "I think I just have really bad allergies." So clearly a little boy on with Asperger's who had no idea that the tears were associated with emotion, and he thought they were just an allergic reaction. So great, it looks like we have everybody back. We're going to move forward. Autism 101, the more I kind of look through the material, I feel like it's more of a graduate level course. There's a lot of stuff in here, but we're going to get through it the best we can. Remember this, autism is the result of alterations in how the brain processes information, which alters how the mind sees the world. And this is something we're going to talk about over and over and over again. Their brains look at the world very differently. We can break it down in terms of the behaviors that we can observe or the sensory input that we give them, but all of that, again, is contingent upon the brain's perception of the world that it interacts with. So, first things first. Okay, so for those of you who have headphones, please put your headphones on. For those of you who have bandanas, please put your bandanas on. Great. We're going to talk about breakfast tomorrow. Joe has been kind enough to bring in a myriad of different yummy things, but now we're going to talk about the breakfast selection tomorrow specifically. So, around your eyes, Donald. Yeah, Daydon.
How am I going to eat my yogurt? Just put the flap up. What if your head's too big for that? You can do it.
All right, you guys are good? Okay, so breakfast number one's option tomorrow is bacon, eggs, sausage, biscuits, coffee, hot chocolate. Got it? This is breakfast selection 2. Got it? Okay, great. Back table, Mary Ellen and Kathy. And you guys come with me out into the hall. Fabulous. And this is breakfast selection number 3, oatmeal, cereal, fruit, tea, and milk. Got it? Well, now that you know which, well, yes, because you're going to have to vote. We're going back into vote. You don't have to wait long.
You obviously don't have a bandana.
All right, you guys can take off your bandanas. You ladies can take off your headphones. Okay, you guys have a small sheet of paper. Please write down your breakfast selection for tomorrow and include your name so we know who gets what. Everybody good? Great. All right. You can pass in your papers. Thank you. Thanks. All right. Oh, bacon. Excellent.
Do you have to order everything?
Yes, I have to order. I'm responsible for ordering everybody's specific order. Thank you, ladies. You're awesome.
We only saw breakfast too.
Well, then, I guess
I
that's
wrote
all
anything.
you can. I love it. Teresa wrote anything. Anything is good for her. So that was just a small demonstration on making you guys aware that although we use different mediums in the classroom, one was a very visual medium. I kind of wrote it down and said, this is what you have to look at. One was more of an auditory. And then for those of you who got to get up and actually move around and go with me, really speaking more to your kinesthetic sense of, we're moving, here we go, we're moving. Although I guess I could have acted out all those breakfasts. That might have been interesting too. I didn't plan that far. So, yes, sir.
I just wanted to validate that those aren't your breakfast choices for tomorrow.
There will be no bacon and eggs. It's not going to come. But just a reminder that even though you do give information to students in a myriad of different varieties, if it doesn't speak specifically to the variety in which they learn in, it's pretty much a moot point. So just be very, very aware of how you're delivering material and be aware of how your students are learning and taking in that material. Because some of them are very visual processors and some of them not so much. So, excellent. We live in a social world. Individuals on the autism spectrum struggle with social brains. So now I'm going to, in theory, click on this. And we're going to watch a fun little cartoon. Yeah, good times. Here we go. Can everybody see that? Yes? It's like, well, get out of the way, Rumsey. All right, thank you. How many of you know what that cartoon is? You can raise your hand, it's okay. Yeah, great, okay. So that's the Hyder Simmel cartoon. As you can tell, it's quite aged. But who can kind of tell me briefly what they saw? And describe the scene. Lostrand, what was it?
Well, at first it looked like I thought two little kids being bullied, and then the one hiding and the other one being picked on and singled out. But then as it went on, I guess I got more into it, so it started to look like the one kid started being like attacked in a very, very bad way, and like a parent came to him, and then the other parent tried coming to help out the kid, and the big triangle, whatever, got mad, started to rip the house down. It got very violent.
So a lot of heavy emotional content there. Amanda, what did you see?
Okay. I'll go with it first, and maybe even still now. I just was gonna go with the bully thing, but that really, the big triangle really did break that rectangle apart at the end. So I don't know that I've ever seen a student get that aggressive. So I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, so more, but there was definitely some aggression going on.
Yeah, the little triangle started off though by like going after the
Uh-huh.
He didn't push first. The little
Mhm.
triangle pushed first.
Okay.
So, but then it seemed more like the big triangle was the one beating up the little triangle.
Okay. All right. Lori.
Yeah, I guess just to go off of what those guys were saying, like at first, if you look at it on a surface level, it just seems like this really kind of quirky cartoon, but if you think more about it, like it seemed like that big triangle was really, really, really aggressive. But yeah, maybe looking at, I don't know, I'm saying the exact same thing you just said, but looking at the end, that might stem from something different. It just
Yeah.
seems like a lot of anger, not towards those little guys necessarily, but just a lot of anger.
In general. Michael, how about you?
Well, I had my head down during the first part of it, writing on this paper. So I saw the tail end, and I didn't see any anger or strong emotions. I just saw this little triangle building a big square.
Okay. Good. Nate.
I think we covered it.
Okay, good. Okay, so what most people in the room saw was a very relationship-driven scenario where one character was interacting with another character, and you even call them characters when in fact they're just shapes. This really speaks to our proclivity to inherently associate social behaviors with everything and anything. You know, we give our pets people names. We name our cars. We're constantly giving very social attributes to everything and anything we encounter. It's just kind of something we do naturally. That's because we have very social brains. If you were to give this cartoon to a student with autism, they may very likely just say, you know, it's a bunch of triangles and circles and they're moving around. Because there isn't a social relationship necessarily for them. They don't necessarily very quickly jump to the social aspect of the interaction. So Ami Klin, a fabulous, famous man who works over at Yale University, talks about the world being divided into social and non-social. Social behavior is potentiated by eye gaze. If you look at the way that you're seated around the table, how do you know who's speaking to whom? You typically turn and you will orient your body and you will look at the other person, and that's the nonverbal cue that, hey, you know what, I'm attempting to interact with you specifically as opposed to interacting with the entirety of the table. Eye contact lets the other person know you're thinking about them. If you think about two people who are falling in love for the first time, there's an enormous amount of eye contact. You're wanting to convey, I'm thinking about you as much as you're thinking about me, and really trying to connect and bond. Newborns and their caregivers do this a lot. You know, after a couple of days, the infant is able to orient to the eyes of the caregiver and realize that, you know, you're looking specifically at me. You're not looking at some, you know, distant, far-off object. You're looking specifically at me. And that social interaction then begins a long series of sequences of neurotransmitters and chemicals in the brain that are released that continue to kind of cycle back and reinforce and feed that interaction so that it continues to be successful. Now, with that in mind, thinking about some of our infants as they're even very early on, prior to 6 months old, oftentimes you'll hear parental histories and they'll say the baby was fussy, it was really hard to calm the infant, they didn't feed well, they didn't latch on very easily, so there were very early struggles. Now, it wasn't just struggles for the infant, it's also huge struggles for the parent, because as the caregiver, you want to connect with your newborn. You want to give them what you think that they need, and you want some reciprocity in that. You want to see that what you're doing is the right thing, so that you continue to want to do that behavior. Yes?
Are you saying that kids with autism as infants were fussier, or just talking about in general?
No, specifically students with, a lot of times, very classically autistic students, that's the scenario that we hear a lot. It was difficult for them to latch on, it was difficult for them to eat, it was difficult for them to sleep, they didn't like necessarily being held. And then we can talk about regressive autism later on, which is a very different pattern of progression. But that very early classic autism, you can definitely see a lot of those things happening prior to that 6-month period. This is a skill that infants practice within the first few days of life. As I was saying earlier, they tend to the eyes of their caregivers and are able to recognize whether their caregivers are looking at them or other things. The visual contrast of the sclera to the iris informs us that the eyes are important in social behavior and adaptive learning. If you look at other mammals in the wild, think about your household pets, your dog. I was looking at my dog's eyes yesterday. There isn't a whole lot of sclera, and sclera is that white portion of the eye. And if you think about a face, right? So you've got all these shapes in a background, but the most visual contrast is between the white of the eye and then the iris, so whatever colored part that is. That visual contrast alone lets us know everything we need to know about the evolutionary biology of human beings and how it's very important for a myriad of different reasons that the human infant attend to what the adult infant is looking at, and giving that back and forth feedback in terms of social interaction. So, for example, evolutionarily, you're out on the field, and the adult looks out because they're taller and they're standing, and they see a predator coming, and they look out towards the predator, and then the infant looks and goes, "Oh, I need to visually attend to whatever the adult is attending to for safety," right? So then they turn their gaze. Now you have mutual gaze going towards that predator. That's how it works, and it's just that simple sometimes, but it's also so important. So, any questions about that? No? Pretty straightforward? Good. All right, so decreasing physical distractions in the classroom help our students focus on the social aspects of the classroom. I tried to think of real life examples, and being a good Catholic schoolgirl, I thought of the space of the confessional. Okay, so you've got a box, right? How much more sensory deprived can you get? You got a box, you go into the box. One person's on one side of the box, one person's on the other side of the box, and they talk to each other. It's very clear from the lack of distraction in that box that what you're supposed to do is only talk to one another. It's not time to write a note, it's not time to use your cell phone, it's not time to take a nap, it's not time to look around the box or decorate the box. It is very clear by the setup of that environment what the expectation is. I would highly recommend that when you're looking at setting up your classrooms that you be just as purposeful in setting up those spaces, that it becomes very, very obvious what each specific space is designated for. Because if you set it up for something specific to happen there, that's exactly where it's going to happen. We were joking around yesterday about bringing our carpet squares, and everybody at some point has had an experience where you have the little preschoolers and they bring their carpet squares. So what do the preschoolers know? That when I have my carpet square, what do? I sit down on it, and then I'm supposed to listen, right, and pay attention to what's going on. It's a very physical reminder that's portable of what the expectation for the behavior is going to be. So I would highly recommend that you keep things very clean and clear and obvious. Theory of mind. Okay, so initially I was thinking, how much do I want to say? And then I just kind of said it all. So theory of mind is the presumption that others have a mind that is analogous with one's own, and based on the reciprocal nature of social interaction is observed in joint attention, the functional use of language, and understanding of others' emotions and actions. Having a theory of mind allows one to attribute thoughts, desires, and intentions to others. We do this all the time because we have very social brains. We go into restaurants, or we go into the grocery store, or we go into work meetings, and we're constantly scanning the room and looking at everybody else and trying to figure out, what are they thinking? Are they angry at me? Are they thinking about me? Oh my gosh, I'm thinking I think I left my windows open and it's raining really hard. I think my place is going to be flooded, so now I'm distracted. So you're thinking about what everybody else is thinking about, in addition to what you're thinking about. That's a lot of thoughts kind of rattling around a person's head. But it happens all the time, and we do it in a split second. It guides our social behavior. If you walk into a situation and you look at somebody and they're not looking at you, or they're looking away, or they're fidgeting, the things that you're attributing in your mind to those behaviors are that they don't want to be with you, you've said something wrong, they're uncomfortable by the situation, they'd rather be anywhere else. We do this over and over again. I did a lot of it during the interviewing process when I sat in interviews with people. I was constantly watching their body language and trying to figure out how they felt about the situation, how they felt about me, how they felt about the school, and then conversely how I felt about them. So we do it all the time. And that's theory of mind, and that's something that our students definitely struggle with, that ability to do perspective taking. Ta-da! Here's some brain stuff for you. For those of you who are into brain pictures. So on the top you have an individual with autism, bless you. And you can see the hemispheres. So this middle part is the corpus callosum, and it's really in charge of that interhemispheric connectivity. So what you'll find in students with autism is that not only do they have difficulty going from one hemisphere to another, but back and forth from one lobe to another. And we can certainly talk about that ad nauseum in terms of etiology, but suffice it to say that connectivity is definitely impaired. If you look at it, it's pretty obvious in terms of what's going on here during a theory of mind task. Any questions about that? No, just keep going. Okay, core criteria of autism. So it has to be a qualitative impairment in social interaction, a qualitative impairment in communication, repetitive and stereotype patterns of behavior, interests, and activities. Those are the things you need to receive a diagnosis. Impairments in social interaction. Marked impairments in the use of multiple nonverbal behaviors such as eye-to-eye gaze, facial expression, body posture, and gestures to regulate social interaction. Failure to develop peer relationships appropriate to developmental level, lack of spontaneous seeking to share enjoyment, interests, or achievements with other people, by a lack of showing, bringing, or pointing out objects of interest to others. If you think about communication in terms of toddlers, okay, so before they have words to tell you that they want a cookie, what do? They take you by the hand and they take you over to where they suspect that the cookies are, and they point, right? And then the parent says, oh, you want a cookie? And the kid goes, or they just keep pointing like, yeah, you've got it, just hand it to me. So early on, children are able to understand and appreciate that gestures are very, very important. Waving bye-bye, you know, how many times have we taught that to our infants? Wave bye-bye, say bye-bye, or blow mommy a kiss. It's a really important part of that social interaction for a myriad of different reasons. Not only are you able to convey meaning, but you're also able to kind of gauge language. Because there's a vast difference, and we see this all the time with our students, between expressive and receptive language. Just because they can talk a good game doesn't mean that they're understanding that, and vice versa. They may be able to understand. You can take a little kid, you know, a little toddler, and say, go get mommy's shoes, and off they go, do, and they bring back your pair of shoes. They're clearly understanding what you're trying to convey. They could not say to you, all right, mom, I'll go get your shoes. Would you like the black ones or the brown ones? And off they go. No, but they're certainly able to follow that language. So receptively, they're able to get it. We see this a lot in stroke patients who have had strokes. Sometimes it's the receptive language that's been affected, and sometimes it's the expressive. Sometimes they're able to understand everything you say but have a really hard time getting it out, and sometimes it's vice versa. So, failure to develop peer relations appropriate to developmental level. This is a classic one for our students. Oftentimes they will have peer relationships, but they'll be with students who are either really a lot older or a lot younger. They have a really hard time working within their peer group, those students who are defined in terms of chronological age that should share similar interests. Impairments in communication. There's a delay in or total lack of the development of spoken language, not accompanied by an attempt to compensate through alternative modes of communication such as gesture or mime. Individuals with adequate speech, marked impairment in the ability to initiate or sustain a conversation with others, stereotyped and repetitive use of language or idiosyncratic language, lack of varied spontaneous make-up play or social imitative play appropriate to developmental level. In terms of the spontaneous imitative play, this is what our neurotypical kids do a lot of, right? They pick up the banana and they pretend it's a telephone. You know, they put the blocks together and they say, oh, it's a bridge, or oh, it's a house. And it's a series of blocks, or really it's a banana. But they're able to kind of use their imagination. And Jim Harms and I were discussing this yesterday in terms of teasing out our students who have very clearly have Asperger's syndrome and those students who have autism. For our students who are very clearly have Asperger's, for them, when they talk about their role-playing games or their fantasy play, this room becomes the forest. It is Tatooine. You know, it is everything that they are saying that it is, because they're able to kind of extrapolate out and become very imaginative and creative in their play. For our students who have very classic autism, that is a struggle. For them, things are very concrete. We were doing a school play last year, and we had one student who was very insistent, I have to have a top hat, I have to have a cane, and it had to be, in his mind, it was very clear what his character needed to look like. And you couldn't fool him with giving him a stick and like a beret, no, because that wasn't a top hat and that wasn't a cane. So very, very concrete. Restrictive, repetitive, and stereotyped behaviors. I went to an autism walk one year and I saw this great t-shirt and it said, I'm flappy when I'm happy. We see a lot of students who, the more excited they get, the hands start going and they start hopping. I worked with a young man over in California who was 6'2", flaming red hair and bright blue eyes. And you know, very, very bright, very articulate, very much an Asperger student, and this is how he would cross the street. And I was like, whoa, yeah, that doesn't look out of the ordinary at all. And we could sit down and we could have a conversation, and I could say, Adam, you know, what do you think people think when they see you? Well, I'm sure they think I look weird, but I just don't care. This is just what I do. And he called it flinking, and it came from early on when he was a toddler and he had a tinker toy. Do everybody know what a tinker toy is? I'm not dating myself. Okay, so he had a tinker toy, and he used the tinker toy as what he called it, a flinky, and he would just hit it in the palm of his hand. We see this a lot. Students hitting the palms of their hands, flapping, clenching their fists, doing a lot of stuff motorically. And he just did it. And he said one day he would create a band called Flink 182. And I said, go for it. That would be fabulous. We did a community outing one time, and we went to Universal Studios, and he started getting really nervous because Universal Studios, a lot of crowds, a lot of people, a lot of expectations. He went over to the payphone, and he picked up the payphone, and he started flinking the receiver. And I said, okay, Adam, you know what? We need you to take a break, put the receiver down. Apparently inflexible adherence to specific non-functional routines or rituals, stereotyped and repetitive motor mannerisms, persistent preoccupation with parts of objects. The last one, persistent preoccupations with parts of objects, there's a very famous psychologist, and her name is Uta Frith. And she works at the Mind Institute, and I believe it's out at UC Davis. She talks about something called weak central coherence. And for her, it breaks down as thus. So our students have difficulty seeing the forest for the trees. They really are focusing on all the tiny minutiae of all the trees, every leaf, every curve in the bark, every root pattern, and they don't see that it's a forest. They focus so much on those tiny little details that it's really hard for them to kind of branch out. We have a young man here who is fabulous and wonderful and amazing, and he has a lot of OCD type issues. And if you ever watch him trying to take a test and his OCD is kicked in, it is really, really hard for him to kind of get beyond those rituals. Everything has to be just so. He is really stuck on those pieces and parts. Associated symptoms, sensory impairments and motor impairments. So a lot of students, and I had a debate one time with an occupational therapist friend of mine, and I said, you know, there's something called sensory integration disorder syndrome. Not to be confused with sudden infant death syndrome, although the acronym is the same. And I said, you know, have very rarely seen a student who has profound sensory impairments and doesn't have autism, doesn't fall somewhere on that spectrum. And I said, I understand and appreciate that it's an entirely separate diagnosis, but I don't know. For me personally, I have yet to see a student. But our students definitely have sensory impairments, and we're going to talk later on in the slides about sensory information either being really, really enhanced or really, really depressed. And then motor impairments. There are a few students in the building who are very motorically gifted, who can slam dunk on people, and are very, very happy about that. But for the most part, our students really struggle with coordination. They have really their muscle tone is definitely different. They're very, very tight. And I like to say that I can typically spot one of our students out in public from, across the football field because they have a very specific stance and a very specific walk. They have a lot of tightness in their hips, and even our boys, and I call it the Matthew Broderick walk because I don't know if any of you have ever watched Matthew Broderick walk. I really thought he was cute, so I watched him walk a lot. But he had this very tight internal rotation of his hips, right? And so you're like, sure, Rumsey, whatever you say. But our students, a lot of our students are very, very tight in the hips, and they have this very clear gait pattern. Or they're just the opposite, and they have a lot of tonal weakness, and then they're out all over the place, and they're splayed. So motor impairments and sensory impairments. Comorbid or co-occurring conditions, intellectual impairments, ADHD, seizures, regulation disorders. Seizures is something I want to talk to you guys about. So classically, and Mary Ellen could probably speak to this better than I, but most individuals don't have their first seizure in their teenage years. Typically they occur either early on or, but a lot of our students specifically will have a first seizure at age 13 or 14. It's something to definitely be aware of because seizures will definitely impact their learning, that's for sure, and their experience of the world. So, things to think about. Brain-based research. You guys doing okay? Yeah? We've been going for about 40 minutes. You want to take a break? Oh, do I need something to drink? Oh, I appreciate you. Aren't you sweet?
Do most of the students, I know obviously they haven't experienced seizures before, but they don't have a plan in place.
Mm-hmm.
Do a lot of our students have, or those that have problems with seizures do we have something on file related to that?
If we know about it, right, Marilyn? If we know about it, then yes. But it's something to definitely be aware of so that you're not taken off guard by like, whoa, what the heck is that? Awesome. Brain-based research. Recent research suggests that science is attempting to tackle some fundamental questions related to autism. What is the root cause? Oh my goodness, if I knew that, I would be a gazillionaire. Of the psychological impairment seen with individuals on the autism spectrum, and how do we pair interventions with students with such expressive heterogeneity? So now, the heterogeneity of a disorder is something that really plagues geneticists. They like things to be very clean and clear. That something occurs on the 21st chromosome is fabulous, then they go in and they fix that, and life can go on. The fact that what they've seen in terms of autism is that it's all over the board. Certain genes are turned on, certain genes are turned off. Sometimes it's a setting event after the birth of a child that causes a gene to be expressed. But what's most important is that we take each individual student and we look at their symptoms and that we pair the intervention to specifically speak to those symptoms. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing by any stretch of the imagination, and anybody who tells you differently is lying to you. Just to let you know. So it's really important to look at the specific issues that the student is struggling with and then pair the intervention to look at those things. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. You know, it's a lot like weight loss, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all thing for weight loss. What works with some people does not work with other people. Some people can, change their diet and lose 1,000,000 pounds. Other people can do nothing but exercise and eat the same foods and lose 1,000,000 pounds. And some people have to do kind of a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B. And some people still struggle then and have to take, additional medications or go through other things. So, things to think about. This is a lot of words.
And is that why sometimes diet works for some kids and diet doesn't work for other kids?
Absolutely.
there are these fads that go through. We're in gluten-free diets. We're in
magnetic bracelets, hyperbaric chambers. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So we try a variety of things.
Yeah.
Some work for some kids, some work for others, some
Yep.
don't work for anybody.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And it's really important to be able to inform our families of these things because they'll ask you. They'll think that you're the experts in everything, and then they'll ask you, so what do you think about hyperbaric chambers? Or what do you think about wheat-free, gluten-free, casein-free, sugar-free? And you know, it works with some kids and it doesn't work with others. You know, I'm always very suspect of people who say that their child was cured. That's another thing. I'll just put I should put my biases out there. Because for me, autism is a lot like being an ethnicity. I don't wake up one day and say, you know, I'm not Hispanic anymore. It's like, you know, it doesn't work that way. Autism is autism is autism is autism. You may be able to change some of the expressive symptomology. You may, one of the things we do a lot in our drama program is to try to teach our students to be better actors. To kind of fake it out there in the social world if they don't necessarily understand, but to give them the scripts and the experience to kind of feel like they're more competent. And we talked about competency a lot yesterday, but giving our students experiential moments so that they can build that sense of competency out there as they move.
I think also,
well, another thing too, getting back to the knowing the fads and what are out there. Another thing too is you'll get from parents though what causes autism or what do you think causes autism. I think is a way to bridge. They want to see sometimes what the people who are working with their kids are thinking.
Yeah, if you speak their language.
If you speak, and so they want to have that, and I think that's kind of dangerous territory to go into with parents. You know, so I mean, having this and talking about how we as a school kind of talk about what causes because I get that with some parents, you know, especially new diagnoses. We do have a couple kids who have new diagnoses, and they want to know, and I just think that can get us into hot water.
Oh, for sure.
I've seen it when like a professional will say, well, this is what I believe, and well, you know, the parent obviously doesn't believe that, and it doesn't go through well.
Yep.
I think it's a good point, you know, because for us, we really don't care what caused the autism, you know, because there's so many different explanations for that. So for us, we just want to know what's more important for us is, you know, how we can be supportive of that kid.
Right, pairing the intervention specifically with the students that we're working with.
So we look forward to hearing whatever information the parents get from the other health professionals that they're working with. Give us that information because that's why you took them to these experts. That's great. And we'll try to integrate that information here.
Absolutely. Good.
You're right. I think it is dangerous when, you know, parents are asking us, you know, what caused it.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're the expert. You know a variety of causes, but for that one particular kid, can we narrow it down?
No.
That's why it's a good answer to say, give us what you've heard, and we'll take it into account.
Yeah.
But we're here to help and treat, and, you know, go from there, educate, and go from there. So.
For sure. We're going to take about 5 minutes, get up, move around, stretch, go to the bathroom, have a drink, eat some more food, and then we'll be back at like 10 till. So, there's a lot.
There it is.
It's a lot of information.